But I figured, why not get this sunken in screw right here and get this over with. Okay, so I've got an old eye hook, obviously not made for any of Eddie's guitars, but it's got the right thickness, and I like the wide threading on this because it gets in real easy and out. So it goes right here and sinks in fairly deep, but you can't tell how much of this thread or this shaft is in here once it's broken off. So I'm going to go ahead. I have a drill bit that's just slightly narrower than the actual thread on there. So what we want to do is keep in mind that you're going to have an eye hook right here. So you don't want that shaft to go so deep that it's going to block off your eye hook on the end here. So I kind of roughly eyeball it. I kind of know how far I can go. Start off slow. And there, I pretty much know how deep that is. And you can test it by putting something into where you drilled this hole. And I don't see it moving down in that shaft, so I know I'm good. Remove some of that excess little bits that happen. So I pry up the little pieces so that they're not in there. Okay. Then I take this screw hole, eye hook, and I start feeding it in. And as I do it, I go down a couple, and then I want to put some pressure on it and just wiggle it. Because I want to get that shaft that this is going into loose. Okay, so I now know that I can get all the way down to just about where the threads end here. Take it back out. So you now know that you have at least that much room. I only need about that much down in there. Okay? Right now what I've got is a cutting blade on here. And this removes steel rather well. And what we're going to do is go around this about right here and try to keep it just to the width of what that cutting blade is. And what we want to end up with is just the tiniest little piece of metal still holding this end on. Take your time, because if you cut through it, you cut through it. Then you got to do a whole nother one. So I'm getting it down fairly thin. Still not thin enough. It's already getting hot. Real hot. There, if you can see that, how little is being held on there. Just that little bit. That's what you want. Okay, so I know that I've loosened this up fairly good, so this will screw in without breaking off. But I wanted to stick down in there so that when I go to snap this off, I know the end is staying in. And that's where this little guy comes in. And a little bit of coffee. Coffee's done. So I roll these up. These are cheap. And they give you hardly anything inside of them. So what I do is, after I pop that little hole in there that keeps it in here, I push out the excess air and I roll this up. So I now know that I have this much in here, and the slightest pressure is going to produce a drop. And what I'm going to do is put a couple drops down in there. And if I can, try to get it on the wall. Not too much, or it'll come squirting all out, and then you got a mess. So I've got a good amount down in there now. And I'm going to screw this down. And then I'm going to try and just start pushing it back and forth. There we go. Broke it off. So now you've got the sunken in screw. And it's fairly deep. I'm going to drill for the other eye hooks. I had 3 in here for the earlier version. And each one of these holes, I want to make it look like there was at one time. And go fairly deep, so you have room to work with. Now, I'm not using that one, and I'm not using this one. But I do want to show that there were some large screw holes in there. And we'll rough up the edges on the outside of that as well. This version, he never used the eye hooks with the washer that was welded on there. That happened later, late 80s or even early 90s. So you would have a round ring around the outside of one of these holes where he screwed it in, and that washer roughed up the paint in a circular shape. But I now know that I can come back here and get this guy in. I'm trying to do it awkward so I can show you, but yeah, that's going to be tight. But what I do is I'll screw this all the way down in, pull it back out, put a couple drops of super glue down in there, and then screw this in right where I want it, and it won't move. Now we got one more in the upper up here, which is off center, by the way. Now you can go deep on that one. Okay. So we've got that taken care of, and we got the eye hooks drilled, and we'll come back when we start doing the hardware and put those on. Okay, so right now what I want to do is line up my pickguard and just put little holes in there for where I know I need to mount that later. Before I get all the gunk on here, it's good to have things placed so you know where things go and you don't have to rough up anything that you've already done before. And I was looking for a picture of the pickguard, and Facebook popped up, and I thought I'd show you this little gem. That's me with my older brother meeting Eddie Van Halen in 1988 in Akron, Ohio, during the Monsters of Rock tour. I'm the taller one. And hey, I got to meet Kingdom Come. Isn't that cool? Actually, they were the most arrogant pricks of any of the bands that were there. And I'm kind of glad they just died out. They really thought they were the next Led Zeppelin. That's how they were trying to market them at the time. But they had a good guitarist. They had a couple of good songs. Some of the coolest guys, though, was all the guys in Scorpions. They were so down to earth. They'd sit there and hang out with you and just, make jokes and goof around and stuff. They didn't care that, you were some 18-year-old kid in this little town, Akron. They just liked to have a good time and were some really good guys. Eddie was drinking. This is when he was supposed to be sober, but he was drinking, and maybe that's why he had such a nice smile. We followed him out with his bodyguard when he went to go to the bathroom, and on the way back is when we stopped and asked him, and he had no problem. So absolutely. So nice big old picture, and you know, back then it's print film. You got one shot, literally, to get that. And boy, I was glad that that worked out. Nice memory. I don't see my brother much anymore, and it was just nice to have that time. And it was funny at the time. I just got to mention this. The biggest star for the entire Monsters of Rock was Sammy Hagar. Poor Michael Anthony. He was basically left by himself, and nobody even bothered him. I made sure to make a big deal over him and wish him good luck and all that kind of stuff for that night. But poor Michael Anthony. He was just there with his little baby at the time and wife, but sweetest, nicest guy in the world. But I wanted to show you this, and this is a wiring jig that I did from another Franky, just so that I would have it set up for when the time came. And these will go to the input jack, and I'm actually going to replace the wire that I used for going to the tremolo spring claw. I'm not going to use the one here. I always use braided wire, and this was just too thick. So, but anyway. But most of that is done. So, what I do at this point, I just want to get this lined up. Because he only used 3 holes on his pickguard. And I'm just going to do a little starter hole so I know. And just by luck, well, maybe it didn't. Never mind. I was going to tell you I got lucky here and it fell right into place. But using the hole from the template, this one, which does not have a screw in it, actually is pretty good for its placement. But I want to compare it to current day Franky. And to do that, I need to put a tremolo on. That's the placement right there. And if you look at the current day Franky, he leaves room, and it comes off at a bit of an angle compared to where the tremolo sits. So this falls back at an angle. And I know, I just moved it, of course. We can see how much this corner comes out towards the body more than this back edge. And you can just see down in between where that cut is. I'm just going to mark it so I know where to go later. One, 2, 3. I know it seems like you just reproduce what Eddie did, but you do need to get the right proportions in, and you need to get these previous tone knobs to show that there was activity there, and with the volume, and then get this placed correctly. And then I use the aluminum foil that you buy at Home Depot or Lowe's for ductwork. It's an adhesive tape, and it looks like that. And what I do is just cut the pieces that you need on the back, and you can cover the back if you want. But what I've done is use this tape shiny side down so the adhesive part is facing up and will hold the grime. But this is some of that grime that I use, and the adhesive that's on the back of this, even though it's mild, is enough to hold in that grime.